Hi there, hope you're doing well. Martin here, founder of Paradigm Shift, with another quick RYC video. Really, the title says it all. If you want to get at least 80% of the marks in RYC Requirement One, just do what we've outlined in this video. You will need to do a bit of practice, as we've said here. It's definitely worth it. Then you can milk the marks in what is definitely the easiest and most predictable requirement. But if you're watching this video and you're fairly early on in your preparations, try not to feel intimidated or overwhelmed. This is only possible with practice. But it is definitely worth doing that practice because we know what's coming, we know what you need to talk about. That will get you off to a great start, you'll feel confident, and you will be well away towards the marks that you need to pass overall. There is quite a lot to analyse for RYC. Remember, this is the first sitting with the pre-populated spreadsheet, so there's definitely more detail on cost of sales than you would normally find in the older past papers. And there's definitely, with the different garages, the different types of work, you can really analyse things in many different ways. So it's really important not to get overwhelmed and try and do too much because you don't need to. I think the reason that there's quite that much information is because the examiners are going to do quite a lot of the Requirement One work for you in terms of the changes, the percent change and the pound change. We'll come back to that in a moment. So a lot of your appendix work is done for you. In return, they've given you loads of data. So as long as you don't get overwhelmed, then it's going to be a good exam. So we're going to start with revenue. You should start with the total revenue. So look at the overall change, increase or decrease in the absolute value in terms of thousands of pounds and a percentage. So you should already be given those figures in a pre-populated spreadsheet, so it's just a case of not forgetting to include them. Make sure you compare to the 2.2% industry growth rate, which is expected per the advanced information. Obviously, RYC will be doing better, worse, or probably unlikely exactly the same as that figure. But as long as you get the 2.2% in with a sensible discussion point, you're going to get that mark. Make sure you compare to the prior year, which is 4.1% growth rate for the business as a whole. And similarly, either comment that it's doing better, worse, or exactly the same. You need to look at the primary drivers of the overall change. So we can't be too specific here because we don't know what's going to happen in the numbers in the exam, but just some ideas to think about. Is it being driven, no pun intended, by specific locations or specific product or service categories? So look out for that. And then the narrative information in the exam paper might give you some hints as well. Final thing then is the EV target. So make sure you compare to the 15% target. Remember, 15% of all the revenue should come from EV work. But very importantly, as we've said in the brackets, this is assuming you're given an EV specific figure. So what we mean there is you can't automatically go into the management accounts and find a figure for the revenue from EV work. That will have to be given to you separately in the narrative in the exhibit for Requirement One. But obviously, if they give you that information, there is a reason for that. So just take that number, divide it by the total revenue and see how close they are or whether they've passed the 15%, and then make a comment accordingly and possibly see if there's a specific reason that you can find for that. So we need to move on revenue by garage. So we want to see revenue changes, the change or increase in the absolute value in thousands of pounds. You can just put it to the nearest K, that's fine. And a percentage, this should be given in a pre-populated spreadsheet. So we want to see you discuss that for at least 3 garages. Add 1 or 2 more if you have time. And also include the revenue mix figures. Then try and find specific reasons. So specific reasons for the changes at each location or part of the market that you're talking about to explain what's happening by garage. So just some ideas. There could be some marketing initiatives mentioned in the question exhibit in the exam. Customer satisfaction might be going up. There might be real growth in specific services that are connected to particular garages, something like that. Just make sure you include those to support all of your numbers. We then want to have some discussion of revenue by type of work. So just a reminder what we mean there. It's just the 4 different service categories. And some of that should have the revenue mix in as well. So probably in the time available, you can't do everything. So we probably want to see the change, again, in the absolute value and the percentage. We say probably for at least 2 types of work. So look for the main movers, the main causes of what's happening. Add 1 more if you've got time and you're really flying, and also include the revenue mix. And then we want to see specific reasons for the changes that you've discussed in terms of your figures. So again, these are just purely examples. So there might be growth at specific garages that are associated with certain types of work. Or the revenue mix might be moving around because there might be some have declined, some of these types of work, others have gone up, but they kind of cancel out. So overall, there's not much growth in revenue. That's what we mean by the point there on the offsetting. But it really does depend on the day. We can't do that bit for you. What we're trying to do really is just give you a framework, like a to-do list really, or a to-mention list, and then you've got to react to the specifics on the day. So that's probably enough on revenue. So then you need to start thinking about cost of sales. So we want to see the overall change for cost of sales as a whole, again, in pound, £1,000 and percentages. Obviously just ignore the graphic there, which is in dollars, just a bit of generic artwork there. That's not meant to be used. And then worth looking at a growth rate comparison. So compare the rate of growth in the cost of sales to the revenue growth rate. They should obviously normally be moving in line with each other. But if we find that revenue's gone up much more quickly or even quicker, doesn't have to be much more quickly, I guess, but yeah, let's say revenue's gone up by more than cost of sales. That shows good control of direct costs because you're doing more business, but you're keeping those cost of sales from going up too quickly. It could happen, obviously, the other way around, then it would be poor direct cost control. So that's often on the mark scheme to look out for that one. Then you want to see if you can find any specific drivers, again, no pun intended, of the cost of sales changes. It could be parts, but again, these are just examples. It's got to be relevant on the day, just because we know that parts costs are rising. Or maybe there's increases in all categories. That would be fine. Why has cost of sales gone up? Because all of the categories went up. And then you're going to go into more detail on that. I'll show you in a moment. Gross profit here. So again, that's just a bit of generic bit there. Ignore that. So yeah, we want to see the overall change in the absolute value and the percentage. Then look at the margin as well and whether it's gone up or down. And then the primary drivers of the overall gross profit and the gross profit margin change. So it could be perhaps improved performance at specific locations. As I keep saying, that's just an example of what might be the driver. I think you can then, you do gross profit by garage. You just have to plug together. It won't be given directly in the management accounts because they give you the revenue for each garage and they give you the cost of sales, but they don't specifically plug them together. So I think that's just a quick calculation that you'll have to do. You should be able to do. The percentages here, it's just part of the illustration, so don't worry about the 35.3. But we probably want to see at least 2 garages here. So gross profit and the margin for that garage, compare that to the overall margin. Is it pulling up the overall margin or is this a really weak location, that kind of thing? And then do the same for garage B. Again, just ignore the 42.4, it's just for a graphic. And then, some reasons behind those things. And try and do this for at least 2 garages. Obviously, you know what I'm going to say. If you have time for one more, then that's great if you can include it. But you don't have to do everything. It's really got to be careful not to try and do too much in requirement 1. So if it's applicable and significant, you can look at the gross profit performance across different garage locations to try and identify some strengths and areas for improvement. You've got to have the recommendations at the end of requirement 1. There's probably going to be at least 1 or 2 garages that are struggling, so you can refer to those in your recommendation at the end. And you don't need really any more detail of how to improve it. You just need to say that they need to focus on improving it, which is kind of obvious, but it will get the marks. Cost of sales by component. So what do we mean by component analysis? Because we've got the components of cost of sales is the parts and labour are the main ones. So we probably want to see discussion of both of those. You should have time to look at both of those in the usual way. So absolute value change, in other words, the thousands of pounds change should be given to you in the pre-populated spreadsheet, and a related percentage growth or decrease rate. And then look at the reasons for the changes. It's just purely some ideas. Could be supplier negotiations, could be negotiations with staff to affect wages. Then we get to the KPIs. So obviously average revenue per visit. Make sure you compare that to the 213.0, which is the result for the year ending 30th of June 2024, the latest year in the advance information, which becomes the prior year on exam day. Also compare to the 200 to 300 market range and see where RYC sits within that typical benchmark. Utilisation, compare it to the 80.2%, which is the prior year rate, so 2024 results. 75% is considered good in the market compared to those figures. Satisfaction score is 8.6 for the year ending June 2024. That becomes our prior year benchmark, and then the market benchmark is the 8 that's considered good. So hopefully you can see we're comparing to RYC's prior year performance and then also the market benchmark. And you potentially picking up 2 marks for each KPI then, 1 for comparing to RYC, how they were doing, and 1 for knowing the market information. Let's finish off then, because there's quite a lot to go through, but make yourself a kind of to-do list, a to-mention list. You can sketch out what you're going to do in the revenue section, cost of sales section, the GP section. And so there is plenty to do, but as I keep saying, you can really prepare for it. So not as bad. Keep practicing as much as possible to build speed. We'll finish off with a couple of narrative points. These should only be mentioned if they're relevant. Don't just write them in for the sake of it. But remember, there's generally higher demand for EVs in the market. Lots of repairs happening due to potholes, which is a huge problem in the UK. There's growing preference for sustainability. prices of parts, I think I said earlier, seems to be increasing generally in the market. There's also the £10,000 bonus for any garage that achieves 85% utilisation. To calculate the utilisation at the garage level, they'd have to give you some further information in the question exhibit. So if they haven't given you that information, obviously you can ignore that last one. As I said, only include these if you think they're relevant to what's actually happened, what you can see happening in the figures that you've got. Okay, so I hope that was useful. We've covered in roughly 10 minutes or so, I think, everything you need really for requirement one. So that's a third of the exam under your belt. All you need to do now is practice as much as you possibly can, so you can smash it out in very, very efficient ways and not overrun. Don't try and do too much more than what we've said here. It isn't worth it because you'll compromise the remaining requirements. So we'll have some videos for those other requirements, but hopefully you feel now more confident for requirement one, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.